over to Andy Roberts.
Okay, thank you very much. And that was a great bio, thanks Julie, given that you were given no notice whatsoever to try and do that, apart from a little bit of conversation we had about a minute ago, so thank you for that. And thank you to the Goyder Institute for this chance to speak here today. Now, my background is I'm an engineer, actually graduated from this uni, and I am asking myself where were these buildings when I was here. Amazing facilities now, great work Adelaide, Uni of Adelaide. I'm a water engineer and a computer software developer specialising in optimisation. So naturally I'm going to talk to you about people and leadership and touchy-feely stuff. So I'll get onto that now. The Water Industry Alliance, as you heard, is a group of 150 companies, government departments and research institutions here in South Australia. And so this is one of the things that we're doing. It's the one that's probably of most relevance to a lot of the people in the room. And it's about creating some smart specialisation clusters. So I also am aware, don't worry, it hasn't passed me by that we're only 10 minutes from lunch and I've got a 20-minute session. So I'll be going super fast track through this, so listen closely and we'll see how fast we can go. Essentially, the Water Industry Alliance recognised that we couldn't be leaders in every single market in water. That was something that we had to do a lot of soul searching, we had to understand and had to accept that. There were some areas, although, we could already see emerging as existing areas of global leadership. We had to ask, what are we actually good at there? If we were going to take this somewhere around the world and get there, what do we actually got a chance of winning at in a competitive tender when we get there? What do we actually have a legitimate claim in that we can help going? And sure enough, when we started that, we weren't sure what the answers would be. But after doing lots and lots and lots of meetings with companies and different organisations and meeting with government departments, we've come to a few conclusions. I'm going to talk to you about two of the areas very briefly and then touch about one of them in more detail. So we did a review of the members through ICN, which is the Industry Capability Network, which is done by the federal government and housed by DSD now. And we also looked at a bunch of other things. Essentially, the important thing was we're not actually picking winners and we're certainly not making winners. We're actually looking at where these winners had naturally emerged, where these areas of strength and concentrations of knowledge had already emerged, and just looking to try and give them a bit of help to formalise, to connect, to work together. After all, that's what the Alliance does. We don't get in the way of business, we just try and provide a space that business works better. We also went through and had to map the water industry. Now, this was correct at the time I did it. I'm sure you can shoot to pieces about 7 or 8 different groups that have changed names, departments that have changed, companies changed names. But essentially, we had to work through what was going on in the supply chain. And that was an exercise that was instrumental in working with this. We also had to look at where are the competitive advantages held. And it turns out that the shape of the South Australian water industry has a lot to do with the research that's being done and a lot of the smaller consultancies and the consultancies that are perhaps specific to South Australia. The big engineering consultants can bring skills in from all over the world, and that's great. They will bolster whatever we need. However, it's that smaller ones that make the fingerprint and the research institutions and the government departments that have done work here. Now, for those of you that want to see that, there will be an up-to-date version of that put on the Alliance website at some stage, and it will be all linked and everything, but that's when I get enough time to finalise that. So keep looking at our website, you'll be able to get a copy of that later. We had to identify the leaders of the different areas. Now, to do that, we went around and asked a lot of tough questions. These sort of areas emerged when we were talking to overseas groups that were coming and saying, you guys are really good at managed aquifer recharge, particularly ASR. Who do we speak to about that? And we knew roughly who did bits and pieces, but there was no one that you could point to that was the person to go to. So eventually, we sort of started pulling these people together. We'd go and sit down with them and say, and this might be, some research groups, this was some companies. Who are your best suppliers? Who are your best clients? Who are your favourite partners? Everyone was happy to talk about that. Who are your toughest competitors? And that was a bit harder to get out of them. And eventually we said, look, we'll add them to the list and we'll go and do meetings with them. The group got bigger, not huge, but significantly big enough that we had a critical mass of organisations in that space. And we're saying to them, are you interested in taking that knowledge that you've delivered locally and looking interstate and looking overseas to bigger markets? Yeah, your competitors might be competitors locally, but once you start talking about the UK or somewhere like that, they're not your competitors. Your competitors are completely different parts of the world. And generally, we got some good acceptance of that. we got together that small group of leaders. These were often they were the recognised leaders. We'd met with, by this stage, probably a dozen people in each area. And those leaders had already sort of identified each other. That doesn't mean that it's the entire market space. I mean, we didn't go a long way down the supply chain. We certainly didn't go a long way up it. And we didn't cover off every researcher. It was an organisation by organisation bit of work. But we had to agree what some key things if this was going to move forward in any form of structure. And that was to do with purpose and goals and those sorts of things. And essentially we got pretty good commitment around those. And we had actually gone through and pre-populated some of those ideas because it's much easier for people to shoot down ideas than it is to actually come up with them themselves. And they did a great job of shooting down my ideas, which I was really happy for them to do. That last point, we will practice later on today. When if you hang around, you can actually have the Alliance Members Night, which is the networking session of this as well. So alcoholic lubrication is great for getting people to talk when they wouldn't otherwise. Now, we actually have gone down the path of trying to get them a brand. Now, these are brands that you will start to see emerging more and more, and you'll see in the later slides where we talk about where to next, how those brands will be emerging in places. But we got them to meet 3 times, and in some cases there were some icy stares across the table at first. You're my competitors, and what are you doing here, and are you trying to steal my business? Eventually, they started to realise that their competitors were the ones that had the most in common with them, because they had to educate the same clients, they had the same supply issues, they had the same regulatory issues, all those sorts of things, and they started to realise they had more in common to deal with than they did against each other. And when they go to another market, they can actually borrow each other for capacity and also for credibility. And so we're starting to see that happen. So we went through and we've got logos and websites being made. If you've never done crowdsourcing for getting a logo made, that was a great bit of fun. They all got to vote on them and we had lots of options. And I'll show you those logos in a sec. And ultimately, we then managed to get some support from the state government, from DSD, to continue on this program. So they're the 2 clusters that I'm talking to you about today. That's WADA, which is wastewater for region with decentralised applications. That's where our skills around the smaller scale wastewater treatment plants in the regions, particularly the ones that have irrigation on the end of them, ASR, solar, those sorts of things where we actually really specialise. And one of the big things we've got there is that this state has been quite progressive in our standards, and it gives us an opportunity to look at other states around Australia as a good market for those smaller companies that are based here, but also for the research that's going on to flow through local companies, which hopefully means we can see some of that innovation making its way through the companies into the marketplace. Also, the other one was MARHUB, which obviously is Manufacture for Recharge, and that's a group that I'll be talking a bit more about now. And I've only got a couple of slides to talk about where we've been and where we're going, and then you can all go to lunch. But just to give you an idea of what that's doing, because I'm sure you'll see more of that. And I can see some faces around the room of people that have been involved in MARHUB so far. I hope I'm looking at a lot more faces that will be involved as we go through the future of this. So, what has been done? We actually did launch it on the 20th of May, a little quiet launch to officially start it off. The website's live, but we've not been pushing it greatly yet. There's more being populated with case studies and things like that. We'll be putting publications up there at some stage very soon. As we were going through that, we started to realise how strong we actually are in this MAR and ASR space. In talking with CSIRO and some of the unis, we established that somewhere of the order of about 30% of the global academic papers originate from South Australia. That makes us 5 to 6 times bigger in publication than anywhere else in the world. Which, when you say that to someone from I spoke to the Singapore High Commissioner this morning, and that really blows them away. They start to realise, hey, there's something here that's worth tapping into, some knowledge that we can do. And the great thing is that a lot of that knowledge is probably in the room today. So, I don't need to tell you that it exists, but I still encourage you and say, look, we're trying to get that out there. Hopefully there'll be more research partnerships and the like to come. SA Water, who's obviously a player in ASR, has also got a user group or an operators group running. That's been great. Some of the little things that we've seen flowing from one user to another are really simple things like, so how do you stop the fish getting sucked in and all sorts of crazy things like that. And instead of a technological solution, it's like, well, we solved that with a couple of star droppers and some chicken wire. Little, real simple, practical things that on the ground make a big difference, though, to the performance of it. And we're seeing that knowledge flowing between them. But it also means that it gives us a great grounds to go to that group and say, look, we're doing research, we want to do a survey, we want to do case studies, we want to do a tour. And we know that we can go to a group of people that are all on the same page and know what's going on. And so a lot of that's obviously in the councils themselves. And they're also seeing opportunities to work with the regulators and to put their point forward and to negotiate the points around things there. As part of my role with working with state government and their export strategies, we've travelled to Shandong and the Zhejiang and to India and looked at market research around there. There is actually great interest, particularly in some parts of Jinan and Shandong, around the MAR stuff, to try and build some research partnerships with them. And also we're seeing a lot of international delegations coming. There's significant interest of these sorts of things around Ozwater, and we'll be taking quite a number of international delegations to some ASR sites through that stage. So where to next for MARHub? Well, as I said, the opportunities are emerging. The UK, there's been about 5 or 6, I think, pilot sites proposed in their price review 2014 for AMP6. So we'll look to try and engage with them, because that's a space where if we can't get some engagement with them, we are really missing out. We are global leaders in that, and we should say that unashamedly. China is very interested in working with us, as are some areas of Latin America. And we see some of the members of MARHub regularly engaging with Latin America, Middle East and other places. And we'd like to see if we can try and engage that through to actual work, and maybe working with groups like the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank when they're looking into these spaces. We have already provided some CVs and things through to some people in the World Bank to try and help them in some of the more obscure projects that they're doing, but that's the start of a relationship. We're seeing hopefully some new research partnerships and strategic relationships, and that's often working with, as you can see before, Austrade and the state government, leading those in. We're looking forward to seeing them progress a bit. They're early days, so don't expect us to come and arrive and say, hey, we've got great new research programs or anything. Besides, the Alliance won't be the delivery mechanism, nor will probably the cluster for that, but they'll be the marketing engagement, and then ultimately they'll be delivered through the existing institutions, would be my expectation. We're seeing some coordination with the local supply chain and the research and training space. That's going to be something where we need to do a bit more work, and we're seeing that come together, helping people know where to find that, being the place that you can phone and say, hi, I'm from Chile and I want to work with someone who knows about ASR. Who do I speak to? Well, now there's a space they can go to, and we'll simply direct it to the right appropriate people depending on what they need. So it's that one stop, or first stop, not that one-stop shop, but the first stop, so they know where to go. And that depends on what the question, we'll ask them a couple of questions to work out who we should connect them to. We're not experts at any of this stuff. We're just the people that know everyone in the industry, and that's what we're trying to do, is connect it for them. Some administrative type stuff. Charters are being finalised before agreement and opening to new organisations. We've been fortunate enough that as part of the DSD funding, we've been able to appoint a cluster facilitator to help this run through, and Ron's here today. I think he's sitting somewhere near the back. Yep, thank you, Ron. So if you want to get information, hopefully he's got some of the business cards and stuff that you can hit him up for. Once we've got those charters finalised, there'll be a room for other organisations to come in and be part of that, and we'll look forward to seeing those clusters grow and represent a larger amount of that industry. Lastly, you'll see some bits and pieces of this around Ozwater. So we're hoping this will be a launching pad. It'll be continuing to put the great work that's being done through things like the Goyder Institute, the CSIRO and the unis onto the world stage. It's already there, but to formalise it, try and bring it together and help attach it to the South Australian brand. Hopefully so it attracts more people to come and study here, train here, and also to ultimately engage with the companies and the groups that are doing the work. That's been what we're doing. We look forward to having as many of you as possible involved in it in the near future, and I'll be happy to either answer questions now, or perhaps easier will be to do it over lunch, given where the time's up to. So I'll hand over back to Julia. Thanks.